Welcome to Crime Cases. Daniel Arizmendi Lopez was born on July 22, 1958, in Miacatlan, Morelos, to Caterino Arizmendi and Maria Lopez. He had three brothers, Juan Ubaldo, Aurelio, and Diego. In 1967, they moved to Mexico City, settling in the San Juan Pantitlan neighborhood in the Iztapalapa district. His father was possessive, jealous, and an alcoholic, often resorting to violence against his wife and children when angry or jealous. Daniel, the second oldest, faced severe punishment and mistreatment from both parents. He had a calm and reserved personality and enjoyed school, though he repeated the fifth grade. He had a distinctive physical feature: large ears. The marriage ended when Daniel was about 8 years old. After the separation, they stayed with their mother, but she eventually returned to Caterino. Alone, they returned to live with their father, but Daniel harbored deep resentment toward his mother for abandoning them. They moved to Isahualcoyo, where he attended secondary school, but dropped out after the first year to work at his father's workshop, making baby scarves, caps, and sweaters. He worked half-days for less than minimum wage and played soccer in his free time until he met Maria de Lourdes Arias at 20. They married on August 27, 1977, and had 2 children. Daniel was distant with his wife and children, rarely showing affection. After leaving the workshop, he worked in a rubber band factory, earning 80 pesos a week. The stressful job led him to drink and become irresponsible. He then worked at the Secretary of the Navy, counting cartridges and washing employees' cars before quitting. He briefly worked as a street sweeper before becoming a driver for a contractor, a job he held for 4 years. His wife became a nurse at the Social Security Institute, and with their savings, they bought a used van for public transportation. They planned to sell it to buy land, but never did. Daniel developed the same jealous tendencies as his father, frequently showing up at his wife's workplaces unannounced, suspecting infidelity, and becoming violent. His children wondered if he loved them, as he rarely spoke to them. He demanded his wife quit her job. At 26, he joined the Morelos Judicial Police through a family recommendation, but left after 2 months due to staff changes. There, he met someone skilled in stealing cars, who taught him to unlock and start cars without keys. This marked the start of his criminal career. He targeted cars at Plaza Aragon, stealing engines to sell, amassing up to 150 thefts. His brother Aurelio, an auto theft investigator, helped by altering vehicle serial numbers. They formed a 15-member gang with specific roles for stealing, altering, and reselling cars, earning up to 90,000 pesos a month. In 1990, Daniel was arrested and jailed in Barrientos, Tlalnepantla, for a few months. After release, poverty and imprisonment affected him deeply, and he resumed theft, fixing a red convertible Shadow as a hobby. Upon Aurelio's release after 2 years, aided by Joaquin Parazuniga, they resumed operations with police support, knowing people in various government departments, including the PGR and the Chamber of Deputies, to whom they sometimes sold cars. A niece mentioned a kidnapping in Cuernavaca, Morelos, where the family paid 1 million pesos for the release, sparking Daniel's interest in easy money. He convinced his gang that car theft was no longer viable due to frequent arrests and bribes. On June 11, 1995, he executed his first kidnapping, targeting gas station owner Martin Gomez. They blocked his car, abducted him, and took him to their hidden workshop. Blindfolded and tied, Martin was held in a bathroom. Daniel demanded 1 million pesos but settled for 350,000. Left in a soapbox at the gas station, and released him on a sidewalk. On December 7, 1995, he kidnapped Leobardo Pineda, owner of warehouses in Ixtapaluca, State of Mexico. They took him to a property in a house in Valle de Chalco, where they kept him for 2 months. Since the family refused to pay the money, Daniel Arizmendi decided to do something he wasn't used to, which later became his trademark. He ordered 2 of his henchmen to lay him on his back. One sat on his chest and the other on his knees. They held his head. Then Daniel took a pair of scissors with 30-centimeter long handles, meant for cutting up chicken, and cut off his ear. Before that, he prepared ashes from a burned cloth to cauterize the wound. He had learned this after his uncle cut his hand with a broken bottle, applied ashes from a burned cloth, and stopped the bleeding. Subsequently, Daniel contacted the man's wife and told her that near her house, at a gas station, she should look for a plastic bag in the planter with a message from her husband. The woman went to the indicated place, and upon opening the bag, she was greatly surprised to find her husband's ear inside. Daniel sent someone to collect the money, but they were arrested and the cash was confiscated. Later, Daniel called to ask why he hadn't received the money, to which the woman replied that they should release him since she had done her part. Without receiving the money, they took his life, wrapped him in a blanket, and dumped him on a road in Chalco. Then he called the wife and told her he had released him so she could pick him up. Hours later, they found him dead, and despite searching for the perpetrator, they couldn't find him. Afterward, they had amassed a considerable sum of money, so he bought a nightclub in Ciudad Neza, where he frequently drank until dawn and eventually became addicted to drugs. By then, Daniel Arizmendi had created a well-structured criminal group. Each member had a specific function and did neither more nor less. Each did their part, but he participated in everything, from the kidnapping, guarding the victims, involving himself in the negotiation, personally cutting the victims' ears, releasing the people, distributing the money to his group, devising methods to launder it, acquiring weapons, vehicles, and safe houses, having everything perfectly organized. He even befriended many law enforcement officers who offered him protection. He had created a great empire and could get anything. In 1996, he took Carlio Alonso Hernandez, the son of a gas station owner. They took him to a second house in Valle de Chalco, locking him in a room with only a small metal door through which they passed food. They kept him there for 7 days. Then they told him the house was being watched by the police, so the captors left and abandoned him. Days later, Daniel and an accomplice personally retrieved him and took him to his nightclub, which was not operational because it wasn't making enough money even to cover expenses. After the family's resistance to paying the money, he used his methods again and cut off the man's ear, which he sent to his brother in a Gerber jar hours later. 2 days later, the police launched an operation, arrested 3 people guarding the victim, who was fortunately still alive and was freed. Afterward, Daniel tried to persuade the police to release the detainees but failed, so he contacted a former police officer who did business with them to help get the detainees released, ensuring neither he nor his wife, who had become part of the group along with their relatives, would be implicated. The entire family worked with Daniel Arizmendi at that time, from his wife, children, and in-laws. They were all part of the business. Then he reached an agreement with the police subdirector, who asked for 150,000 pesos to avoid their involvement. The money was delivered to his mother-in-law's house, and the patrols watching Daniel's house withdrew. However, the kidnapped man's family pursued the case and also informed the federal district attorney's office. While investigating, they found a used car dealer from the Xochiaca Edge named Martin Fuentes Marquez, alias El Gato, who provided information on Daniel Arizmendi's whereabouts, mentioning he was heading to Veracruz. The commander and other judicial police officers went to that state and found him with 2 others, immediately negotiating their release by offering 250,000 pesos, a Dodge truck, and a wine-colored spirit. After this, the federal district attorney's office obtained some phone numbers and requested technical support from the Attorney General's office to trace them. Once they listened to the calls, the federal government became aware of Daniel Arizmendi's existence, as they didn't know who he was since he was very well protected. That same year, he carried out his 11th plan. This time it involved Alejandra, a young Spanish woman and the daughter of the owners of Anís del Mico company. They followed her for 20 days, but their first attempt failed when she noticed she was being followed and escaped, but they didn't stop there. 2 months later, they intercepted her on Cien Metros Avenue and took her to a house in San Juan de Aragon. Once there, they chained her and only gave her a sheet to cover herself. They demanded 10 million pesos, but after days of negotiation, they settled for 4, asking that the money be wrapped in pillowcases and arranged to meet near a pedestrian bridge at the edge of a hill, heading toward Puebla. And so it was. They arrived in a Grand Cherokee SUV. He carried 2 pillowcases, tied with a curtain cord, knotted on each side, and attached like saddlebags, which he placed next to a pedestrian bridge. When Daniel and his companion went down for the money, 2 men emerged, firing their weapons at them, and they responded in kind, losing the money in the chaos. Daniel was furious. Upon returning to the house where they held Alejandra, he ordered 2 of his accomplices to restrain her, then took scissors and cut off both her ears. Despite his brother Aurelio's pleas not to do it, he contacted her parents, telling them he had left a package for them at a booth on Avenida Cien Metros, now demanding $8 million to release her. When the family arrived at the booth, they found a gruesome discovery. The next day, they agreed to give him the money, after which they set her free. The family was already waiting to take their daughter immediately to a surgeon, but her condition was so severe that they couldn't reattach them as more than 54 hours had passed. They attempted to reconstruct them with grafts. On April 1st, Luis Manuel Gascon, owner of a grocery trading group, also fell victim to Daniel Arizmendi. They forced him into his truck and blindfolded him, taking him to one of their houses. Once there, they chained his neck with a padlock. The room was 1.5 meters long by 1 wide. After a few hours, they contacted a family member, urging them to stay calm. They then bound his hands and feet with tape and gagged him with a cloth. Daniel then cut off his left ear. They untied his hands and left penicillin in a box. Days later, they released him after the ransom was paid. A month later, they abducted a young man named Raul Navaricano. His father, a banana exporter and warehouse owner, was taken to the San Juan de Aragon house and chained up. This time, they demanded 3 million pesos, but the young man's father immediately notified the authorities, who identified the caller as Daniel Arizmendi. They set up recording devices for the conversation. He demanded 3 million, knowing the police were involved, yet they agreed to gather the money in 30 days. Investigation personnel monitored the calls during that month. The father managed to collect only 967,000 pesos, informing the captors, who rejected the offer. Days later, they received Raul's ear in response. When the 11-day deadline passed, he said he had gathered only 1.5 million, which was also refused, and hours later, he killed him. They wrapped him in a mat and left him in Santa Marta, near the Federal District Penitentiary. Daniel Arizmendi was unfazed by the authorities' pursuit. Raul's body was found on May 15th, unidentified for a month in the morgue. Months later, his parents reclaimed his body. In October 1997, Abelino Ruiz Noriega, a businessman in the wine and grocery business, La Europea, was kidnapped, with a ransom of $10 million demanded. Arizmendi sent an ear to his son in a cereal box within a commercial store locker. After the ransom was paid, he was freed near a church. In December 1997, he killed Jose Trinidad Hernandez, Gerardo Rafael Martinez, and Bartolome Franco El Chino, members of his group, allegedly planning to turn him in. He wrapped them in blankets and abandoned them near the Valle de Aragon housing unit in Ciudad Neza. This situation spiraled out of control, with Mexican authorities struggling to apprehend Arizmendi. By 1998, the PGR released a composite sketch of the feared Daniel Arizmendi, alias the Ear Chopper, nationwide. The first crucial arrest was of Daniel Venegas, a group member, who provided information leading the police to Cuernavaca. According to him, Daniel and his brothers stayed in Cuernavaca and Coautla hotels. The federal judicial police traced fixed cellular and radio phone numbers to Cuernavaca. The telephone company informed them of a phone registered at Ontario Street No. 12 in Belo Horizonte. On May 22, 1998, they surveilled the house, seeing Daniel's son leave in an unlicensed car. After a chase, he crashed, was detained, and revealed the house was open. The police, ready to enter, ordered them to surrender peacefully. Afterwards, someone responded that there were only 3 women and a child. When they entered and asked where Daniel Arizmendi was, They answered that he had left in a red truck. Inside, there were 50 million pesos and gold coins. Inside, Maria de Lourdes Arias, Daniel's wife, Veronica Jaramillo, Arizmendi's daughter-in-law, and his daughter, along with his young grandson, were detained. They later contacted Arizmendi and informed him that they had his family and that he should surrender. He said he would call back later, but he never did. However, this criminal story does not end here. Thanks to the capture of his family, many more important details came to light. The police learned that Arizmendi's family never used their real names and had obtained false birth certificates from government offices, making them legal. With these certificates, they had obtained various documents under different identities. Furthermore, lawyers and judicial agents were involved in the operation. 18 houses and many millions of pesos were seized. On July 30, 1998, Aurelio Arizmendi was with some construction workers who informed him that his car was surrounded by police. He asked one of them for the keys to his car to escape, but in his attempt, he crashed into a taxi and a minibus. He tried to flee, but the police intercepted him and wounded him in both legs. In August of that same year, Daniel Arizmendi was left alone. He wanted to recover the money that had been confiscated and retire. He considered becoming a real estate agent outside the federal district. He thought of living in Querétaro with one of his lovers named Dulce Paz and a son he had with her. But none of that would stop Daniel Arizmendi, and he acted again. This time, it was about Raul Nieto del Rio, a businessman from Querétaro. He gathered some of the people who were still free and rented a house in Querétaro. He showed them the routes Raul Nieto took daily and explained how they would proceed. They made 2 attempts, but he changed his route and managed to escape. Later, days after, they intercepted him again on an avenue in Querétaro. They blocked his path, and the person in the car tried to reverse, crashing into Daniel's car, which was waiting behind with another car. One of them got out and fired his weapon, hitting him hard on the head. The man fell to the ground, and they quickly loaded him into the truck, taking him to the Santa Barbara neighborhood, where they noticed he was in bad shape and had no pulse. They decided to cut off his ears and dispose of the body, burying it in a room where they used a hole to store a cooler where they hid their money. He asked 2 of his accomplices to cover the hole with a cement floor. They then contacted the family and demanded $15 million for his release. When the family was willing to pay, in exchange for proof, he sent them a message in a popcorn bag previously left at the ticket booth of the Querétaro bullring. It contained Raul's watch and ears. That night, they contacted the family and agreed to give them $9 million and asked for a month to gather the money. But they wanted proof he was still alive. So with a pick and shovels, they broke the cement floor to retrieve the body. They took it to the bathroom and cleaned it. They bought facial powder and covered his face with it. Then, they applied serum with gauze and adhesive tape, bandaging his eyes. They covered him up to his chest with a sheet and placed a newspaper of that day's date beside him, taking several photographs. They sent an envelope with some photos to prove he was still alive, adding $100,000 inside as a threat if they did not comply with the deal. On the same day, August 17, 1998, the police entered Daniel Arizmendi's house in Querétaro, where his lover Dulce Paz was found. Inside, they found a cooler with 8 million pesos, and Daniel Arizmendi's phones were already tapped. By then, the police knew about Raul Nieto's death. They set a trap. To capture him, they had heard that he was meeting 2 of his accomplices to receive a fake voter ID on Rio Churubusco Avenue near the Sports Palace in Mexico City. It was 7 in the evening. Daniel Arizmendi was about to pick up the ID. He was near the Naucalpan municipality. Suddenly, he was intercepted by several men who forced him into a truck and blindfolded him. He was taken to an unknown location. Upon arrival, he realized it was a warehouse. There, the judicial police were waiting for him. They finally knew who the ruthless criminal was, known as the ear cutter. They informed him that his lover, Dulce Paz, was detained along with his accomplices and that they knew about Raul Nieto's death. So they took him to Querétaro to show them where he had buried the businessman. The criminal story of this individual had come to an end. When interviewed, he mentioned having no regrets for what he had done, feeling nothing for causing harm, and that if he were free, he would do it again. as it was his passion. A terrible case that marked criminal history in Mexico, being considered one of the country's criminals.